Ready Player One, a vision into the future of our virtual reality. And if you fast forward to this moment in the film, you'll see this.
You don't need a destination when you're running on an omnidirectional treadmill with quadraphonic pressure-sensitive underlay.
A VR treadmill, a solution to the biggest problem in VR right now. And of course, that is locomotion. Traditionally, we use the thumbsticks to act as our virtual legs, but this can have, well, some unintended side effects.
And then we...
But luckily, there's a solution, and a few weeks ago, I received that solution in the form of the cheapest and most well-refined VR treadmill, or slide mill, that is now available to buy. And so with that, introducing the Katwalk C2 Core. Katwalk were kind enough to send me one to test, and I quote, "give it an unbiased review." But this isn't just about the Katwalk, it's about VR treadmills in general. Are they the future of VR, or just another gimmick for the problem that is locomotion? Also, it's worth noting that from my perspective, I have only had a very small amount of experience with VR treadmills, through the occasional convention. I have previously never tried a Katwalk, so I'm really starting fresh. I say VR treadmills, but really there is only one true VR treadmill, and that's the Infinideck. But they have been radio silent for some years, and seem to be nowhere near a commercial product as far as I know. And while I'm referring to the Katwalk as a treadmill, they operate in completely different ways. You don't tread, you slide your feet to move forwards and backwards in the game. Imagine dangling your feet off the chair so you just touch the floor and slide your feet back and forth. That's how it feels to walk. Everything is super slippery, so when you put your full weight, moving your legs backwards and forth is actually relatively easy. But rather skip forward to testing, let's start this at the beginning. The biggest barrier for entry for the Katwalk has always been two things: price and size. And it's, well, a beast. It's very heavy and hard to move around. Wherever you decide to put it, think carefully, because once assembled, this is not getting through your door. It gets delivered in this huge box, and it weighs approximately 80 kilos, and comes as compact as a form as it can, and that means it needs to be assembled. The generational advancements help Katwalk out in this one, as it's really easy to put together. The online video walks you through, and its simple step-by-step led me to answer a question you'd normally answer at the end: value for money. The Katwalk's price is $999, with a pre-sale of $899. To put that into perspective, the Katwalk C2 was $1,300 and the C2 Plus $1,500. The difference in specs essentially boils down to this. With the Core, you'll be getting the bare essentials: no haptic feedback in the base plate, no LEDs, and no seat. You can still add a seat, but one isn't included. To be honest, the only thing I can imagine being interested in is the seat. And I wrote this next part of the script before I'd even tried it, because I was that impressed with the build quality. Every part was sturdy as the last, and it really felt high quality. I was expecting 3D printed parts, but everything was cast and built to a standard of a large company. If I had to give some criticism, I'd say the shoes leave a little bit to be desired in terms of build quality, but that's about it. They are custom shoes after all, with a built-in slot for sensors. So to answer the question, does it have good value for money? Absolutely. This is clearly not a cheap product, and when it costs less than the headset on your head, you know it's off to a good start. But that doesn't mean you should buy one. Once assembled, you charge each sensor with a magnetic charging cable they provide. Everything works off their custom software to sync each sensor to give you feedback like steps and calibration. First thing you must do before each run is calibrate. Unfortunately, I didn't pay too much attention to the setup video and was walking backwards for the first half an hour, but that was completely my fault. Initially, one thing I was expecting was for it to be really loud in terms of walking. As you can imagine, walking on what is essentially a plastic bowl, but it really wasn't that loud. Not to say it was quiet, but it definitely wasn't distracting. The speed at which you slide and walk is really up to you. You can remove these strips on the bottom of your shoes, which allow you to slide more freely, but I had no problem running with none of them on. You can lock off the shoes to give you more grip when getting on the Katwalk, and you just flick them back when you're ready to roll. The straps go over your waist and feel very strong. I'm quite tall and heavy, and it had no problem keeping me secure. You'll notice I lean forward when I run, and that's because that's the best way and most natural way I felt when running or walking. If you've never used one of these, you're probably picturing this as a replacement for traditional thumbsticks. And while I tested a fair few games based on my experience, it's not a replacement. In games like Boneworks, Skyrim, Fallout, more immersive games, it honestly is a mind-blowing experience. But in fast-paced games like Contractors, it was almost impossible for me to compete compared to using the thumbsticks. To put it bluntly, I sucked. But I thought I'd put this to the test. The Walking Dead is one of my favourite games, and especially the Horde mode. So I thought I'd do a side-by-side comparison to see which one I survived the longest, using the thumbsticks versus using the treadmill. I'll keep it playing in the background. One thing I do like is the comfort in knowing I'm not going to punch the wall, and that's because where I set it up I can stretch my arms out in any direction. The only one that could get in the way is the ceiling, but that's more of a height issue than anything else. But like I said earlier, this isn't ideal for fast-paced games like Contractors. Doesn't mean it doesn't have its place. Like most of us, we choose VR because we choose immersion, and playing immersive games like Fallout, Skyrim and Boneworks are what this was made for. Running away from a horde of zombies or walking through a vast wasteland is an incredibly immersive experience. The faster I moved, the more immersed I felt. The lines become really blurred, and the longer I was running around for, the more sucked in I was by the experience. It really does show that the missing link isn't field of view or clarity for me. The missing link is the legs. But there is one thing that pulled me back to reality, and anyone who's used VR is all too familiar with this. It's not motion sickness, it's exhaustion. Yes, no surprise, running around on a virtual slide mill while simultaneously slicing up zombies is exhausting. 45 minutes at a time was enough for me, and it really felt like a cardio workout. If every VR user had one of these, we would be categorically the fittest gamers around the world. Obviously this will get easier over time, but for now it's going to take some getting used to. As you can see from the comparison, the winner clearly is the thumbsticks, even though I died like this. But one thing I must add is running away from zombies was way more immersive than I was expecting. I've played the trial a fair few times, but there is nothing quite like it. It really does add to the intensity. But the one thing the KatVr can provide is a fix to the biggest barrier in VR, and that of course is motion sickness. A percentage of the population can't even tolerate VR due to signals being sent to the brain not correlating with what you're doing. And so I wanted to put this to the test to see if locomotion was the missing link. This is Robbie, and unfortunately, like a small percentage of people, he gets extreme motion sickness when playing VR. He had the original Quest, but was restricted to games like Beat Saber, where motion wasn't an issue. Anything that requires movement would give him enough motion sickness to essentially ruin the day. Now I thought I'd stick him on a game like Boneworks, as there really isn't much going on at the start, and it's more of a sandbox, but this is almost certainly a game that has no comfort barriers. It took a second for him to understand how to walk, but once he did, he's easily capable of running around in the game, with basically zero motion sickness. The longest I had previously known him playing a smooth motion game was Rec Room, and that was for less than 2 minutes. The only feedback he did give was the deacceleration made him feel slightly uneasy, but this is more of a game-to-game optimization issue. So as far from his experience, it's clear that the Katwalk, if properly optimized, is a cure for movement-based motion sickness, which is an added bonus and brings much more availability to the ones experience that issue. It's also worth touching on that you can play both standalone and PC VR games, but you will need something called a Cat Nexus, which essentially acts as a bridge to connect your Katwalk to your standalone Quest. The PC integration is available with just the KatVr software, and requires essentially no download or integration. To finish up, is this worth buying? And my answer to that is it depends. If you're someone who plays VR for competitive reasons, I'd say no, unless you're very good on the treadmill. I find it hard to believe you'd really compete at a higher level. But if you're someone who plays VR for the immersion aspect, I'd say absolutely. There is nothing quite like walking around your environment by literally walking. That's a strange sentence to say, as that's a natural thing to do, but in VR, it's not the norm. Is it perfect? No. But will it ever be perfect? I'm not so sure. The Katwalk has improved with every generation, but the fundamental concept is the same, unless there comes a time where an Infinitec-like device shrinks down to the cost and size of a Katwalk. Then I'd say without a doubt, the Katwalk is the most immersive accessory you can buy for VR. And at the pre-sale price of $899, I think it really does have the potential to be in every home. And all that I think it needs is more support and optimization from the gaming side to make this the perfect VR locomotion device. All links regarding the new Katwalk are in the description. And if you like today's video, like and subscribe. And as always, I'll catch you on the next one.